What do we say, fam? Welcome to Simplexity.
Season 4.
Season number 4 of a podcast where we take seemingly complex matters and attempt to make them plain and simple. My name is Sammy Foster on season number 4 with the one and only co-host worth having on season number 4,
Oh my God.
Boots.
Good heavens.
If you have not
That's what we call
realized,
redundant.
this is season number 4.
Yeah. Wait, what season is this?
Oh, it's a milestone.
It is. There are 4 seasons in a
I
year.
know, yeah, totally.
I don't know if it really correlates to what we did.
Absolutely nothing. But
Yeah.
I know very few people will celebrate 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Well, 3 in the beginning of another. But I'm going to celebrate it.
I think we
it's-
should celebrate.
I think it's quite the big deal.
Becca was dancing over there.
Yeah, little Beyonce.
Nice.
I know how to do it.
It's pretty good. Yeah. It's certainly worth celebrating. We want to shout out those of you who followed us along this journey thus far. Don't fall off the wagon quite yet.
Took a
Also-
little break.
Yeah.
So at times that we take breaks, there's a little loss of momentum. I don't think that's going to be the case with this season.
You're speaking that one into
just
existence. And then it's like
prophesying.
7 plays. No, but go ahead. If you're listening to this episode right now and you've been following us for some time, actually click the follow button
That's right.
and give us a little rating of some stars, please.
Yes. Review it and show some love. Now, if you got nothing but negative to say, you keep it to yourself.
Yeah, there's an old adage about that.
However, if you do have something good to say, then say it.
In detail.
That was a point one time I made during a sermon.
Yeah.
If you think something good, say it. Give life to it.
I remember that.
Anywho, what are we getting into today?
Yes. So this is going to be a little bit of a different episode in the sense that it's kind of a topic that we just personally find interesting.
Very.
I think most people when they see, actually I mentioned this to Ryan, our student director, yesterday. I was like, all right, so we're going to do an episode on blank. And he was like, huh. little off guard. So anyway, it's something that we find interesting, and that would be the fascination with true crime.
Yes.
So if you look at entertainment across the board, whether it's TV shows, true crime reenactment shows, murder podcasts,
Yes.
You look at when we set out to start a podcast, of course we did some research. We didn't entirely wing it, even if it seems like that. But one of the most popular subject matters is true crime. That's what
right.
people listen to, especially, you've got some stats right here,
Absolutely.
younger women. I know it's a particularly...
That was arbitrary.
Right.
Well,
Younger women.
It's not arbitrary. That's what the stats show, my friend.
Oh, right. And that is that out of all podcasts, correct
Yep.
me if I'm wrong, but true crime, even podcasts that really focus on what happened after, whether it was a crime, a murder, something in that regard, it consists of around 33% of all podcasts listened to.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. That's what Pew says.
Yes, that's absolutely. 34% of U.S. adults who have listened to a podcast in the past year say they regularly listen to podcasts about true crime. That was a 2022 Center study.
Yeah.
But it is a really widely sort of consumed podcast and genre, whether it come by way of media, TV shows, Netflix, documentaries, and or podcasts. And the reason that this is fascinating to me is because I have a 18-year-old that this is his main, and I've tried to deconstruct it and figure out why and dive down into why are you so enamored with true crime podcasts, but he cannot get enough of it. And yet you and I then, out of our sort of intrigue and wonder of where this fascination is rooted, we've done some survey study ourselves, have we not, little partner?
On the streets, walking around. Yeah. So, you mentioned documentaries. I think the things that immediately come to mind are the Dahmer series, which I actually didn't watch. But
neither did I. I can't. I'm a pastor.
We'll get into that. But even Ted Bundy, stuff like that. There's a fascination with serial killers.
Yep.
Their stories, how they got there, and what I want to do today is I want to delve into some of those whys.
Yes.
Why is there such a draw? But I don't want to just stay there. I want to examine. Okay, well, how does this affect us potentially? What do we get out of it? And then lastly, what are potential guardrails that the follower of Jesus should implement? And let me just say before we get into any of those three questions, I don't want this to feel like we're being legalistic.
No, certainly not.
Okay, well, that's covered. No, but I don't want to put a burden on anyone else. This is, I think, probably a matter of Christian liberty, and by that I mean let your own conscience kind of guide you. But I do want this episode to be hopefully thought-provoking, hopefully encouraging reflection, and asking these questions of yourself as we kind of talk about them personally.
Absolutely.
But the first question being, why is there this draw? And, I can speak to that a bit. And here's the thing, is there are good reasons too.
Yeah.
So there's kind of good reasons, and then there are maybe more questionable reasons as to, and there's this little picture. Speaking of the prevalence of the topic, there was a whole TV show created called Only Murders in the Building under the premise of people's fascination with murder podcasts.
Yeah.
And like people who were otherwise strangers became really close friends because of their shared interest in murder podcasts. And then there's murder. And anyway.
Totally.
Check out the show. I don't know. It's a
so
good
one
show.
of the things that I think that we should establish is for those that may be listening to this and or viewing, that would say, I don't, that's not my gig. I'm not into it. I haven't listened to anything as it pertains to true crime and or murders. Last sort of crime show that you may have watched is Murder, She Wrote, and that would be,
I remember that. Yes.
Do you remember that? Do you remember Murder, She Wrote?
I don't.
So I just very much dated myself. That is a show that my grandparents used to watch when they lived in Boca Raton in the waiting room for heaven that they lived in called Florida. And all old people.
Okay.
You love Florida.
I do love Florida.
So I guess,
but I don't go there waiting for heaven. I go there to experience heaven. Come on, somebody. However, Murder, She Wrote was a terribly boring show, all about how this woman would sort of take it upon herself as a vigilante that would investigate murders, and yet she would outsmart various police precincts so as to find the culprit and or the criminal. Mm-hmm. And it was terrible. So, but when it comes to this, I think that we should establish how widely consumed this is, and by the demographics that are consuming it, because I think that's fascinating in and of itself. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay.
But you were also at the front of that making the point that this might not immediately apply to everyone. And I would say I'm probably one of those people who I don't have an intense draw toward this genre.
Right.
But I think it's applicable in other areas in the sense that I am a news junkie.
Oh.
So whether it's fear regarding this kind of stuff or outrage it is applicable. So that's why I feel like an air of self-reflection is, why am I drawn to seeing bad news? So.
Well, touche, and I digress. Okay. However, let's give sort of some stats to underpin how widely consumed this is and who's consuming it. Among U.S. podcast listeners, women, ladies, all the ladies, women are almost twice as likely as men to regularly listen to true crime podcasts. And I believe there's a specific reason why, but you're going to have to wait to find out.
Okay.
Second, podcast listeners with less formal education are more likely than those with higher levels of education to listen to shows about true crime.
Yeah, because the more educated they're listening to Simplexity.
Amen to that. Moving right along, women with lower levels of formal education are the most likely to listen to true crime podcasts.
You like how I said something similar on the front end of this episode, and you were like, "Well, that's kind of arbitrary."
Oh yes. Well, you spoke to you didn't
You're right.
unpack it.
I didn't set the
No,
stage.
you
You're
did
right.
not. And then lastly, and then I'm gonna just back off because I think you got somewhere you're trying to get to, little partner, and I'm along for the ride.
Okay.
However, younger podcast listeners are more likely than older to report tuning in to shows, podcasts, and stories about true crime. And so, obviously, the demographic that mostly consumes are young women, but women far outweigh the men, and also those with less education. I find that very fascinating. And I feel like we're going to unpack that. Actually, I hope you do. You
Well-
be the offensive one.
Yeah. Well, I don't think.
But stats speak for themselves.
Yeah. And then it's like I'm Ben Shapiro. Well, facts don't care about your feelings. No, I think that there are. Here we go. Generally speaking,
Yes.
we're speaking generally. Not, obviously, there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, women are probably more in tune with the ability to empathize with others, I would suggest. And so there's probably a degree, and this is the case that an article I read would make, is that there's a draw to empathize with the victim in these podcasts or in these true crime shows. But I think that there could be a broader reason as well, in that human nature, we love stories. Mm-hmm. We love storytelling. There's something compelling. There's something that draws us in about a story. And what more compelling story than something that's tragic, a tragedy? That's intense emotion. There are elements of fear. There's elements of thrill. And then there's also, getting back to the empathizing, there's an ability and a desire to put yourself in that position of, and here's why the phrase based on a true story. Any horror movie you watch, which I'm not a super big horror movie guy, but when you see those words come up on the screen, based on a true story, there's something that draws us into that. Why? Because that essentially communicates, this could happen to me.
Right. Okay.
So when you hear a story, when you have a natural disposition to empathize with people, and you're flat out told this could happen to you, you're immediately drawn in and you want to watch it.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree with all of that. Yet I believe that there needs to be an element surface. This would be, and now this is to a degree unfounded, and then to a degree underpinned. So I can't build a whole case off of a single article, but the article that I read really resonated with me because this was my preconceived notion as to why, after reading the stats, be that women and younger are most likely to consume this. I believe that, yes, there is an empathetic aspect to them being able to place themselves in the position of either the victim or the one being perpetrated against. Yet I believe that it most resonates with our compulsion, the fear. That it is, as one doctor called it, it's exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Meaning that you can see yourself there and almost it's therapeutic because you can preempt in your own personal life, if you hear the story of some egregious crime, murder, kidnapping, and I can't even tell you, after talking to Asher, I'm like, what was that story about? And he would tell me, and it would be horrific, yet he was enthralled with it. And he would be like, hey, let me tell you about it. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
I had no desire. And he'd be like, it's fascinating. Listen to how they set it up and how methodical they were. And I'm like, dude, that is so wicked. Yet Ruth, now let me just give some I'm going to give some foster family context to this. Ruth has the appetite when it comes to shows, Netflix series, movies, or the like. You're going to be hard-pressed to get Ruth to watch anything PG PG-13 is a no-fly zone. It's too much for her.
Huh.
So she likes G.
Yeah. So she couldn't handle Thor Ragnarok.
She can't handle anything.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the greatest testaments to me sacrificing to the preference of my wife, because I have, my Christian liberty allows me a wide genre where if I watch with her, we're reduced to Sound of Music and
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins. But yet I say all that to say, Asher will start telling about the episode of podcast that he used, and I'll watch Ruth in so many ways not want to hear it, but yet want to hear it. Mm-hmm. To me, what that communicates is Ruth, who can tend to be really given to fear and anxiety and thinking the worst case scenario in situations that she's in. Like Ruth is literally, actually, we're gonna sidebar just for a minute. Do you mind?
No, please.
Ruth, one time when we were early in our marriage with kids, she was in a grocery store. She kept seeing, and I think I told this before, but she kept seeing the same gentleman in the same aisle that she was in. Mm-hmm. She took off running.
Like sprinting?
Yeah, pushing her cart of food.
It's like an episode
down
of
the aisle.
Guy's Grocery Dash.
So as to get away from this guy, only then for Lucia and Asher to be like, it was the most embarrassing, skin-crawling moment of our life. And I said, Ruth, you do know that grocery stores operate in a certain way where you go from aisle to aisle.
Yeah.
It's likely to meet the same people
Yeah. It's like
in the aisle,
Ruth,
with you.
He worked there. He was wearing
a uniform. Like, she always thinks the worst.
Yeah.
And so I could tell when Asher was telling the story, she didn't want to hear, but she so badly wanted to hear. To me, that's exposure therapy.
Sure.
Tell me what happens so I can prepare myself for it in the world of fear that sometimes I give way to.
Sure.
And I think that's the draw. We just went a long way around Robin Hood's barn to tell a short story. But the principle is, I think it's fear, even unknowingly sometimes, that is the magnetic force of why we want to hear true crime.
Yeah, but I like the concept of preparation too.
Yes.
And we're kind of,
that's right.
We're speaking for positive reasons, why we're drawn to this potentially.
Right.
But you think of, if you listen to a podcast and it's like telling how somebody got assaulted on their late night jog, potentially that raises awareness.
That's
potentially that makes you a little bit more, not fearful, hopefully, because again, there's this balance, but maybe a little bit more aware of your surroundings. I know we have a security director here who will communicate, hey, this is what could happen.
That's right.
And that's not to instill fear, but it's to instill discernment and awareness so that, okay, let me just know what's going on here. That way I'm not a more vulnerable victim.
Totally.
So I think preparation. Recently, I heard a friend of mine I haven't done any research on this, but he was telling me that the horror genre came into existence shortly after World War II. And that was a way for people to, as you were saying, like exposure therapy, kind of deal with the problem and the reality of death, but in a safer vacuum. So
Totally.
like there is no real fear or threat at play, but it allows you to interact with it. And then one last reason that I can think of that could be a beneficial reason, one more reason to be a reason, to listen to something or to watch a TV show or whatnot that has elements of true crime, particularly documentaries on, like we mentioned before, serial killers. I think that there's a real educational aspect to it.
Absolutely.
In the sense of understanding how did someone get here?
Right.
What is their thought process? I know that's fascinating to a lot of people who are especially interested in, psychology and whatnot. But even you look at a show like Breaking Bad, super popular, super well done.
Yeah.
But it demonstrates the depravity of man and the slippery slope of compromise and how we can rationalize really evil decisions, but one at a time. So I think that there can be an educational aspect to true crime shows like that, in
I
just
think that was
our
why,
understanding of human nature.
You take the Dahmer, documentary. The Dahmer, was really fascinating by and large, as psychologists said, and even the producer said. It lets you into the mind and world of Jeffrey that so many people wondered about, because it just by and large remained sort of this overshadowing mystique because of even his courtroom presence when all of this was going down and he was being tried. He gave very little indication as to what was the driver behind that, especially paired against what seemed to be at way back when, that there was somewhat of a wholesome upbringing, a sort of a normality within his family construct, all of this, and yet there was never any information or material given. This is back, I believe, in the 80s when all of this, actually, can you fact check that as to when Jeffrey Dahmer's whole saga, but this then unpacked the mind, the methodical sort of pre-calculation of when he was actually kidnapping and then what he would do. And it really did demystify for a lot of people, oh, this is how serial killers work. Yeah. This is their mental construct or method. And it really did sort of bring it back down to your point, how we can be prepared and then suspect of those that could commit the same crimes.
Are you talking about when he committed his first murder?
No, when actually he got found guilty for the series of murders that he committed. But yeah, up until that documentary, nobody really understood how depraved he actually was. Yeah. And what was the driver. Sure. And then we found there was a driver. There was abuse and there was all kinds of...
Well, it answers the question, how do you get here?
Yeah.
How do you get to this point?
Absolutely.
And I think it's probably been really helpful for therapists and psychologists who maybe deal in the realm of trauma to understand how important it is to reckon with these things and to work through them and heal from them.
Absolutely.
So he was caught in July 22nd, 1991.
91?
91, wow.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
It was the year John was born.
Oh, Johnny
Maybe
Blaze.
he played a role in his capture. Yeah, so before we move on to the following question that I had, which was, well, what does this give us? What's the effect on us?
Yeah.
I do want to briefly, again, just thought-provoking reflection. There are probably negative reasons why we're drawn to these things as well. And I want to just at least tell on myself, there's something within my nature that if I listen to an episode of true crime or whatnot, as I'm reflecting on the killer or the kidnapper or whatever, there's a check within me that's like, I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
That I think potentially there's a desire to evaluate ourselves based off of the worst so that we can walk away feeling pretty good. Maybe morally, I'm a pretty good guy.
Sure.
I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but
I would agree with that, and yet I would be very careful so as not to be condescending about that.
Yeah.
I think that there is a degree of depravity that you can hear about someone doing certain things and realize, wait a minute, that was wicked and demonic and totally depraved and debased, and to where you can rightly go, I'm not that bad. I mean, God forbid you go, well,
he has a point.
I've considered it myself. If you get there, then you're like, wait a minute.
Whoa.
So, right. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of demonize the measuring rod in there too much, but I do believe that it helps you sort of go, wait a minute. Because we can be our own worst critics at times.
Sure, but again, I'm saying this from the perspective of this is a negative reason why I'm drawn to it, so that I can have a sense of self-righteousness.
Yes.
When in actuality, I'm a depraved human. Like, apart from Jesus, where would I be?
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I think here's the elephant in the room, and I don't want to project this on anyone else, and you start like getting fidgety.
All right.
You're like, oh,
What
no.
is it? What's
No.
it going to be?
The reality is some of us may have an unhealthy draw toward violence. Or we really need to examine personally, am I garnering entertainment from someone else's real suffering?
You better preach.
Like, especially when it's based on you can draw the line between fictitious stories or based on a true story, and maybe there's a line there, I don't know. But if this is based on a true story and I'm eating it up about the details and the what happened and how planned out some atrocious thing was, it's like, this was a real person.
Yeah.
This was an image bearer of God, and they endured incredible pain and suffering and fear and all those things. Like, I got to be real careful not to find that entertaining.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. That is the biggest driver of me investigating Asher when he, and Ash, if you're listening to this, I love you, buddy. He and I just have two completely different, genres of entertainment. My concern is that it is entertaining, whereas Ash's retort many times when I'm like, why do you like that? How do you listen to that? And yada, yada, yada. He says, I find it fascinating and it lets me inside the mind of.
Yeah.
And so for those various benchmarks, I go, okay, I get it. But if it were to cross that to where you would be sort of, encouraged in any degree of joy and entertainment in listening to it, I would then say, I believe, and I'm just going to say it, I think that's dark. Mm-hmm. That's dark. For that reason, actually, people that watch horror movies, and I mean God-fearing, Jesus-loving, really, incredible Christians that are like, man, we can't wait for this to come out. I'm like, it is so bizarre to me how one could sit and watch that degree of gore. I mean, there are horror movies that when, what's the most recent film festival? Sundance, and
like it.
Yeah, but anyway, where they'll premiere these horror movies, and there are people literally in the theater throwing up, having to walk out because of the degree of gore. That is so dark that I don't know how. Now, when it comes to a movie, I mean, we're talking about true crime based on a true story. When we're talking about horror flicks and film that people create that are fictitious, and yet people go there for entertainment, that's some sick junk. I'm just going to say it. And those are for the people in the back as well. That is some sick junk that you would be entertained by that degree of gore.
Yeah.
I question everything about you.
I question your salvation. Okay. Yeah, and I think hopefully we presented the admirable reasons to delve into some of these genres, in addition to the more questionable reasons. So my encouragement to the listener or the viewer would just be, take a real honest reflection and evaluation of where you fall in that. If it is legitimately, I just want to understand how somebody can get here. I want to learn. I want to be more prepared. I want to deal with things in a safe way. Like, I'm not here to project, don't do it. Like, but I think we need to be real honest about those,
100%.
those things, and hopefully this could point out blind spots. But just, again, hearkening back to, why am I so drawn to news or seeing really awful things happen in different cities? And it's like, now I can get upset about that. So there needs to be a real check on intake, and I know we've talked about that before.
Totally. And I think you saying that, let's up the ante a little bit with the elephant in the room. In that, I think the first element is, how would you surmise the one elephant in the room?
The elephant of finding violence entertaining.
Entertaining, right.
Yeah.
The reason that elephant needs to be sort of spotlighted and surveyed and really one gets honest with is because you have to have a really good definitive reason as to why you're fascinated with true crime. And I believe that a legitimate reason is I like the preparedness that it causes me, where I like the inside perspective of what causes one to do such an act, to perpetrate against others, to cause such pain, that it would really satisfy my fear that I'm able to demystify it a little bit. Okay, those are legitimate reasons, because you have to get there being honest with yourself, because Scripture does tell us, Paul does, by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, when it tells the believer and the follower of Jesus to think on these things, be anxious for nothing, but by everything in prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God, and think on these things, that which is noble and trustworthy, excellent, of good report. You cannot, unless you have a definitive landing spot and reason why, you cannot conclude, well, listening to true crime is really noble. It's really trustworthy. Yeah. It's really of good report, unless you're investigating the why behind the what. But if it is entertaining, I would say that's dark.
Yeah. And two follow-ups. I'm going to do a Jesus juke on everyone here.
Here we go.
Everybody hold up your bracelets. No, but seriously, like if there's ever an appropriate what would Jesus do moment, like I can't necessarily picture him relishing an episode of a gory, like I think it would break his heart that's a child of his.
Yes.
Who has a real story and like real pain. So I don't want to do the Bible thing.
You just did.
Yeah, the Bible thing, as if that's a bad thing. But in addition to that Jesus juke, I would also say, let's just take an examination of how these different things affect us, right, and be very honest about how it affects us. Totally. In the sense that we talk about intake. If I eat a bunch of garbage, I'm going to feel like garbage. If I'm listening to a bunch of true crime stuff and it extends beyond that educational aim, and I start to feel more anxious, I start to have less peace, I start to be more skeptical of my fellow man in an unhealthy way, I start to think down, I start to think dark, maybe my intake is a little disproportionate. I would say that's probably, the answer isn't necessarily cut it off entirely. You know, you can never listen to this, but let's just be aware of what our ratio is.
Totally.
Because our intake can really affect the way that we think and the way that we feel.
100%. I think, Jesus said in Matthew 6, he said, the eyes are the lamp of the body. Now, I'm going to, in this case, I believe that it's apropos to say eyes and ears are synonymous because it's a window of intake. The eyes are the lamp of the body. If the eye is bright, Jesus said, then the whole body is bright. If you're looking at things that are noble and trustworthy and of good report and excellent, these types of things, really gauging and being myopic to a degree in what we're going to allow in our gates. He says, then your whole body is bright. But if the eye goes dark or the ear goes dark and you allow all kinds of horrific, sinful intake in, he said the whole body goes dark. And what kind of darkness is it? Oh. Meaning it's so black. It's so destitute of light. That I think one just has to be really, really honest and not mindless when it comes to intake, because whether you like to believe it or not, it has implications and effects. Mm-hmm. So if the reason is it really helps preparedness, okay, then you're on high alert. You can still have bright eyes and bright body. You can still see clearly and be ready for and understand degrees of depravity. But if you are mindlessly just consuming and trying to find in some way entertainment, do know, don't be so foolish to be negligent too. It is darkening something. Mm-hmm. It could just be making you callous that you're not even impressed anymore, and that would be a terrible use of the word, but moved anymore by horrific stories of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
If you can yawn at that and it doesn't make you cringe and empathize, or at least go, oh my gosh, you don't look now, but you've been desensitized.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And keeping in mind that there are real people in our lives that God has called us to empathize with.
Absolutely.
And to have
that's good.
heartbreak for. So if I'm expending all of that elsewhere.
Good. That's so good.
But yeah, as we get ready to land this plane, I do want to get a little bit more practical, and this is from my own curiosity, speaking to you as a pastor, and we joke about kind of that mantle, but as funny as it is to when you're growing up, like in elementary school or whatnot, to see your teacher at a grocery store, and it's like, they have a real life. Whoa. I think some people look at pastors potentially in a similar way.
Huh. Yeah.
But you do watch entertainment. You know?
Yes.
You are leading your family in and compromising with Ruth as to what to watch. But I want to get really practical as to what does that look like for you? What does the decision process look like? How do you maintain a light eye gate so that your body remains light? Because you made the decision to not watch Dahmer for whatever reason.
Right.
But surely you've made other decisions of, okay, this is acceptable. I want to understand that a little bit.
Yeah. So my decisions are based, by and large, twofold. One, actually threefold. Three. I'm just going to
make it four.
4 or 5. I got a 5. 5, 6. No, it's threefold. So when it comes to my form of entertainment, specifically as it pertains to media, my calculations are, one, according to what my whole family can consume, and I don't have to sit there with heavy checks and, screening certain things. Although one of the software programs that Ruth and I do use now, this was a Ruth edition. She loves VidAngel. So VidAngel sort of purges any given movie of, questionable scenes, anything sexual, curse words, things like that. It'll go through and sort of bleep them out, yada, yada, yada. And so that's an application that we apply when we're watching a family movie that might be PG-13. And so I have to make my decision based on, is this beneficial to the greater whole? That would be one.
So you're essentially playing it for the youngest ears and eyes in the room.
Totally. However, Ruth and I have 2 different degrees of conviction. So, I'm going to watch Top Gun with my kids, and I'm even going to watch, Braveheart, or we're going to watch, what was it eludes me right now. But nevertheless, when I'm with my boys, we'll watch certain, I love rom-coms with Lucia. Oh yeah, I'm a big rom-com guy.
Yeah.
And so Lucia and I base it according to the greater whole. Secondly, I am also not one that likes anything. This is my temperament. So I don't apply a holier than thou aspect to this, or even a moral standard to this. I can only handle so much. That's, certain people can consume a lot, and it seemingly is ineffective.
Yeah.
It doesn't rock their world. So I have a certain, genre of what I like that's just in keeping with who I am. And I understand that it's very hard to delineate who you are with the moral convictions that you have. But there are some things that either is just a little too dark for me, or a little, like case in point, glad I remember this. Do you remember the last scene in Saving Private Ryan? Come on. Maybe some of our listeners, viewers do.
I'm ashamed to say I have not seen it.
Holy cow,
Oh, no.
Boots.
I said I was ashamed. I don't know what else you want.
Oh, my gosh.
Can't watch it right now.
Anywho, there is a scene, and so, hey, you're not going to watch it, but I'm just going to tell you there is a scene
Spoiler
towards
alert.
the end. I'm sorry?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. And if those of you that are listening haven't watched it, shame on you, but I'm going to tell you about a scene towards the end. There is a scene of where this young soldier is on the stairwell. he meets this guy that he thought he could come to an agreement with, and it sort of remains blurry to me. Nevertheless, he stabs him and ultimately murders him, but it was like this slow, and he's like whispering in his ear as he did it. And the look on this young soldier's face as this guy is forcing this knife into his gut, it messed me up. Maybe somebody out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. It jacked me up. I remember for days after, like I couldn't get the image out of my head, and just the empathizing with that young soldier. And that was a Spielberg. Can we fact check that? I believe that was a Spielberg classic.
Yeah.
That movie will go down in the Hall of Fame. But there's certain things that I can't handle.
So you wouldn't watch that again?
I'd skip that part.
Yeah.
Now I was a lot younger when I watched it. So that's one. What do I like? Like right now, I love Suits.
Yeah.
Come on. I got any Suits shout-out fans out there? Suits is fascinating. I want to be an attorney. Yeah.
You'd be a good one.
I want to be an attorney, and I want to wear
sharp
really
dresser.
fine suits. And I
You
want to
just
live in
want
Lower
that
Manhattan.
corner office.
Huh?
You want that corner office.
And the corner office. Although I love corner office. I have one. And I love it.
We won't say what corner they're in.
And then lastly, I watch according to what are my convictions? What really do I feel Jesus would co-sign? And it's not a Jesus juke. For me, do I believe that he would not have a problem sitting on the sofa next to me? Now, I don't know how he would feel about Harvey Specter.
Yeah.
But Jesus loves Harvey
loves
Specter,
Harvey.
and he wants him to come into the kingdom.
Is that a Suits guy?
Yeah, that's a Suits guy. That's like the senior partner at this firm. Nevertheless, I watch according to my conviction, because I do not want to get up from a form of entertainment and feel like I compromised my beliefs for eye candy, ear candy, for whatever that is. That would be catering to my flesh rather than my spirit. And so for that, I know that just sounded very pastoral and very moral, but
Which is what I asked for.
Yeah.
To be fair.
But I'm an entertainment guy. I love a good Netflix series. Like I just got done watching, I loved The Last Kingdom. I like medieval. Now there was some parts in there that were really sketch. So I had to skip over those. However,
VidAngel can only do so much.
VidAngel couldn't keep up on a couple episodes.
Buffering.
So
That all makes sense. Can we take those three and then just contextualize it to the Dahmer series?
yeah.
As to how you made that practical decision?
Yeah, the Dahmer series, number one, there was a degree of pornography in that. No way. There was blood and gore in that. No way. It's a no fly for me. Can't handle it. Can't handle it. It had the overtone of that show in its entirety was down.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I don't mind there being hard scenes and like wars and battles that are part of the storyline, but you got to bring me up. I'm in it for entertainment. I don't want to get up from the sofa feeling like, dag.
Yeah.
Like my soul got sucked out of me because I spent an hour and a half watching something that had no moral redemptive aspect to it whatsoever. I at least win the battle at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Hoorah. I want to see, the Braveheart scene at the end. So Jeffrey Dahmer, that was all just depressing. I'm not into depressing, morose, dark, down entertainment.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. No, I didn't watch it either, and I think it was just because certain people had said similar things about it, and I was just like, I don't even want to test those waters. But again, not to demonize anyone who watched it or found educational benefit from it, or
There's a ton of Netflix series that maybe don't deal with true crime or what have you, but like when we talk about like Ozarks, the Ozark, like I hear, oh, this is incredible and this and this. For me, my convictions don't allow me to watch anything that would promote
Exactly. What's
Sexual
lesson here?
immorality or promote?
Is this celebrating something, or is it
Yeah.
pointing out the depravity of
I
it?
can't celebrate sin.
Kind of like Breaking Bad. Like, I don't think it celebrated the downfall of Walter White.
Right.
You know, it just kind of pointed it out.
Yes.
It's funny. I was talking to Ryan yesterday about this episode, again, student director. Ozark was the same way for him. He was really into it, and then he got convicted and was like, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Totally.
yeah. Well, hopefully this was
We covered the gamut, little partner.
we did. As a different kind of episode. Hopefully it was still interesting or helpful or, I don't know, thought-provoking. Again,
Yeah.
that was the ultimate goal. Thought-provoking and hopefully reflective.
Amen.
If you have any thoughts, please let us know. You can either comment on the YouTube video or let us know on Instagram. I don't know why I keep poking the table right here.
Well, that's quite all right.
Thank you. But yeah, follow us on Instagram at Simplexity Podcast. We also have a new email that you can sign up for. Get the most up-to-date info from us, sneak peeks, and the like. What else we got?
That'll do it.
That'll do it. Again, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, either Apple or Spotify.
Review.
Yeah, leave that review if you enjoyed.
Love you guys.